It was a bright sunny morning when Anna stepped off the plane at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. My heart raced with excitement, but I also couldn't shake off a little nervousness. This was my first solo trip, and although I had studied English for a long time, speaking it in real-life situations felt like an entirely new challenge. "Okay, Anna," I said to myself, taking a deep breath as I grabbed my suitcase. "You've got this. It's just another language, and you know more than you think." For years, I had learned English from textbooks and online courses, but now I was about to put it to the test. Traveling to a foreign country is an adventure, but it also comes with its fair share of challenges, especially when it comes to communication. Today, I'm not only going to explore Paris, but I'm also going to share my journey with you. As we travel through the city together, I'll show you how I learned English through real life situations and how you can do the same. Whether you're asking for directions, ordering food, or making new friends, English is the key to unlocking new experiences. And trust me, you'll be amazed at how much you can learn just by talking to the people around you. So don't forget to turn on your subtitles and repeat after me whenever I pause. This will help you improve your pronunciation and boost your confidence. Let's get started. As I stepped out of the airport, the warm breeze of Paris hit my face, and the hustle and bustle of the city surrounded me. Cars honked, people chattered in French, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and anxiety. I had always dreamt of visiting Paris, but now that I was here, I realized how much of a language barrier still stood between me and the full experience. My first challenge came when I tried to find a taxi. Standing in front of the taxi stand, I could see a line of cabs, each driver waiting for their next passenger. I pulled out my phone to check the address of my hotel, but quickly realized I wasn't sure how to pronounce the street name in French. What if I mess up the pronunciation? I thought. Taking a deep breath, I decided to go for it. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to one of the drivers. "Can you take me to Hotel Lumiere?" My voice sounded a little unsure, and the driver looked at me with a curious expression. He spoke something in French that I didn't quite understand. "Pardon?" I asked, trying to catch the words. He repeated, slower this time, "Hotel Lumiere, oui?" I nodded, hoping that was what he meant, and got into the cab. As we drove through the busy streets of Paris, I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I had practiced so many phrases, but hearing French all around me made me feel like I wasn't quite ready. Still, I tried to remind myself that this was all part of the journey. I would learn through each conversation, each interaction, and each moment. While in the taxi, I practiced a few phrases in my head. "Can I get a receipt?" Or, "How much is the fare?" Simple questions, but they would be important when I needed to navigate the city more on my own. The taxi finally pulled up to my hotel, and I felt a sense of relief. I paid the driver, saying, "Thank you" in my best English accent and took my bags inside. I had made it through my first challenge, but I knew there would be many more ahead. Each step forward in this beautiful city would also be a step forward in learning English. After checking into my hotel and unpacking my things, I decided to take a walk to explore the neighborhood. Paris had an energy I couldn't resist, and the best way to get to know a city, I believed, was to get lost in its streets. I wandered through a narrow alleyway, past boutique shops, and eventually found a small cafe tucked away on a quiet corner. The aroma of freshly baked croissants and coffee filled the air. It was a cozy, inviting place with a few tables outside where people sat chatting and enjoying the sunny afternoon. My stomach rumbled after a long flight. I was starving. I walked up to the counter, where a young woman with dark curly hair and bright green eyes was standing behind the register. She smiled at me as I approached, and I smiled back nervously. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, but now that I was here, I wasn't so sure. "Hi," I said, my voice slightly shaking. "Can I have a coffee, please?" She nodded and responded, "What size would you like?" I paused. Medium?" I replied, unsure of what she meant by the sizes. She gave me a quick nod, and I realized I'd just made my first real connection with a local. But it didn't end there. As I paid for my coffee, I noticed she had a little pastry on the counter. "How much is that?" I asked, pointing to the croissant. She smiled warmly. "It's €3," she said, pronouncing each word slowly and clearly. I repeated after her, €3, making sure I was pronouncing the numbers correctly. When she handed me the coffee and pastry, I thanked her, saying, "Thank you very much." She smiled and replied, "You're welcome. Enjoy your coffee." It felt amazing to have that simple interaction, especially after my earlier worries. I took my coffee and sat down at one of the outdoor tables, letting the warm sun soak into my skin. I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I had done it. Even if it was just a small exchange, I had successfully communicated in English, and it gave me the confidence to continue my journey. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how important these small moments were. English wasn't just a language, it was a tool for connecting with people, for experiencing new cultures, and for making memories. That day I not only got to enjoy a delicious pastry and coffee, but also learned something important. It doesn't matter how small the interaction is. Every time you practice, you're one step closer to fluency. The next day, I set out to explore more of Paris. I had a map in my hand and a sense of excitement in my heart. Paris is a city full of history, art, and culture, and I couldn't wait to see it all. But there was a small voice in the back of my head reminding me that not everything would go according to plan, especially with my English. I walked to the famous Louvre Museum, where a huge line of people was already forming outside. As I stood there, trying to decide if I should buy a ticket in advance or wait in line, I noticed a woman with a clipboard walking toward the entrance. She was tall, with short blonde hair and a friendly expression, and she seemed to be offering information about the museum. "Excuse me," I said, taking a deep breath. "Can you help me? I'm not sure where to buy a ticket." She smiled kindly and pointed toward a nearby kiosk. "You can buy tickets there," she replied in slow English. "It's just 15 euros for entry." I nodded and repeated, 15 euros, got it. "Thank you." I walked to the kiosk, but when I arrived, I realized I didn't know how to say, "I would like one ticket" in English. I stood there for a moment, feeling unsure, before I finally decided to just try. "Hi," I said to the woman behind the counter. "One ticket, please." She smiled warmly and said, "Sure, that'll be 15 euros. I handed her the money and thanked her. I felt a rush of accomplishment. The words didn't come out perfectly, but they worked. And that's what mattered. I spent the next few hours wandering through the Louvre, marveling at the artwork and sculptures. But my adventure wasn't over yet. On my way out, I decided to try a different route back to my hotel, hoping to discover English with a kind smile. I nodded gratefully. "I'm lost. Can you help me find my way back to Hotel Lumiere?" He nodded and pulled out a map. "Of course. You just need to take a left at the next intersection, then straight ahead. You'll see your hotel on the right." "Thank you so much," I said, feeling a deep sense of relief. "You're welcome." "Enjoy your walk back," he replied with a friendly tone. I felt lighter as I followed his directions. As I walked through the more of the city, I ended up getting completely lost. As I walked down one unfamiliar street after another, I realized I didn't know how to ask for directions in English. I felt my anxiety rising. What if I couldn't find my way back? What if no one could understand me? I decided to stop at a small cafe and ask for help. The barista, a young man with light brown hair and glasses, was busy behind the counter, but he noticed my hesitation. "Can I help you?" he asked in streets. I reflected on the experience. I had been scared to get lost, but instead, I had learned something valuable. Every mistake, every awkward moment was a lesson. English wasn't about perfection. It was about communication, about connecting with others, and that was something I could do. The following day, I decided to take a break from sightseeing and visit a local park to relax. I sat on a bench under the shade of a large tree, watching families and groups of friends, enjoying the warm afternoon. As I pulled out my book, I overheard a group of young people nearby speaking in English. I couldn't help but listen. They were laughing, joking, and speaking with such ease. It was the kind of conversation I longed to be a part of. After a while, one of them, a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and a friendly smile, turned to me. "Excuse me," she said, her accent light but clear. "Are you traveling alone?" I looked up a little, surprised, and nodded. "Yes, I'm here by myself. Just exploring the city. That's awesome, she said, her eyes lighting up. I'm Sarah, and this is my friend James. She motioned to the man sitting next to her, who had short, messy hair and a casual, laid-back vibe. Hi, I'm Anna, I said, feeling a little shy but also excited by the chance to speak with them. We're actually locals here, James said with a grin. We've been living in Paris for a few years now, but we love meeting travelers. Where are you from? I'm from the United States, I replied. It's my first time in Paris. That's so cool, Sarah exclaimed. What do you think of the city so far? I hesitated for a moment. It's amazing. But I'm struggling a bit with my English. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm saying things correctly. Sarah smiled reassuringly. Don't worry about that. English isn't our first language either, so we understand. Just keep practicing, it gets easier. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Here were two people who weren't judging me for my mistakes. In fact, they were encouraging me to keep going. It made me realize how important it was to surround myself with people who supported my learning journey. As we continued to chat, I found myself speaking more confidently. James and Sarah asked me about my favorite places in Paris, and I was able to answer in English, even if I had to pause and think for a moment. They didn't mind at all. In fact, they helped me with a few phrases I wasn't sure about. You could say, I love the architecture here, Sarah suggested, pointing to a nearby building. When it was time to leave, Sarah and James invited me to join them for dinner at a local restaurant. We know a great place that serves amazing French food. We'll help you order if you're not sure about the menu, James offered. I couldn't believe how kind they were. I'd started the day feeling nervous about being alone, but now I had made new friends. I walked with them through the streets of Paris, laughing and talking along the way. My fears about the language barrier started to fade. I realized that making mistakes wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was simply part of the learning process. At the restaurant, we ordered together. I had to practice a few times, but by the end of the meal, I had successfully communicated my order in English. We spent the evening enjoying delicious food and talking about everything from travel to our favorite movies. When I said goodbye to Sarah and James that night, I felt incredibly grateful. I had come to Paris not just to see the sights, but to push myself out of my comfort zone, and meeting these kind people reminded me of how much I was learning, both about the city and myself. The next morning, I woke up feeling more confident than ever. My time in Paris was coming to an end, and I wanted to make the most of every moment. I had met some wonderful people, practiced my English, and felt a connection to the city in a way I hadn't expected. But there was one final challenge I had to face before I could leave. I had planned a visit to the famous Montmartre neighborhood, known for its artistic history and beautiful views of the city. It was a place I'd seen in countless photographs, and I couldn't wait to experience it firsthand. As I made my way there, I noticed a small street market selling handmade goods, local food, and souvenirs. I thought it would be the perfect place to pick up a few gifts for my family back home. As I browsed through the stalls, I found a beautiful scarf that I knew my mother would love. I picked it up and walked toward the vendor, an older man with graying hair and kind eyes. He smiled at me as I approached, and I felt a little nervous. I had been practicing my English, but negotiating prices and making small talk still made me uneasy. "How much for the scarf?" I asked, trying to sound confident. The vendor looked at me for a moment before replying in a thick accent, €35. I froze. I wasn't sure if that was a fair price or not. I'd heard that haggling was common in markets, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. I stood there, unsure of what to say next. The man noticed my hesitation and smiled. "You can make an offer," he said, his tone friendly. "What price would you like to pay?" I thought for a moment, then said, €25? He raised an eyebrow, considering my offer. How about 30? I smiled, feeling relieved that we were negotiating in a way that was comfortable for both of us. "Okay, 30, I agreed. "Thank you." As I handed over the money, I realized something important. I had just negotiated in English. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments where I felt unsure, but I had communicated effectively. I had faced a challenge and come out successful. I continued to wander around Montmartre, feeling proud of myself for pushing through that awkward moment. The rest of the day went smoothly. I visited the Sacré-Cœur Basilica, walked through charming streets, and admired the artists sketching in the square. Everywhere I went, I found myself practicing small conversations in English, asking for directions, or simply greeting people with a hello. Bye. The time I returned to my hotel that evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't expected. I realized that learning a new language wasn't just about mastering vocabulary or grammar. It was about taking risks, making mistakes, and continuing to practice every day. The next morning, I packed my bags and headed to the airport, reflecting on all the experiences I had in Paris. It had been a journey of self-discovery, and I was returning home not only with souvenirs, but with a newfound confidence in my ability to communicate in English. As I boarded the plane, I smiled to myself. The fear I had felt when I first arrived was gone. I had learned that it was okay to make mistakes, that every interaction was an opportunity to improve. And most importantly, I had learned that language was the key to connecting with the world around me. As the plane lifted off from the Paris airport, I looked out the window at the city below, my heart filled with a mixture of emotions. Paris had been everything I hoped for and more. I had explored the streets, experienced new things, and most importantly pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. But now it was time to return home. Sitting back in my seat, I reflected on my journey. I had come to Paris with a fear of speaking English, unsure of my abilities, and nervous about making mistakes. But each day, I had faced my fears head-on. I had interacted with locals, negotiated prices, asked for directions, and even made new friends all in English. What struck me the most was how different I felt now. I was no longer afraid to speak. I had learned that language wasn't something to fear. It was a tool, a bridge that connected me to the world. Sure, I still had a long way to go in my language learning, but I had gained something more valuable than perfect grammar or vocabulary. I had gained confidence. As the flight continued, I began to think about how I could maintain this confidence and continue learning. I realized that learning a language isn't just about formal lessons or textbook exercises. It's about living the language, experiencing it in real-life situations, and connecting with people who speak it. When I got back home, I made a promise to myself. I would continue practicing English every day. I would seek out opportunities to speak, to engage with people, and to learn from my mistakes. Paris had taught me that the more I spoke, the better I would get, and that I didn't have to be perfect to succeed. In the weeks that followed, I kept up my practice. I joined an English conversation group, watched movies and TV shows in English, and even found a language exchange partner online. Each time I spoke, I felt a little more at ease. Every conversation was an opportunity to grow, and I welcomed the challenge. One day, as I was talking to a friend in English, I realized
something. I had stopped thinking about the words I was using.
I was just speaking naturally, as if the language was a part of me. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that, I realized, was all I needed. Looking back at my trip to Paris, I could see how far I had come. The shy, hesitant traveler who had arrived in the city had transformed into someone who was no longer afraid to communicate. I had gained not just language skills, but a new sense of self-confidence. I wasn't just speaking English, I was living it. As I continued to practice and improve, I knew that the journey didn't end when I boarded the plane home. It was just the beginning. Language learning, like travel, is a lifelong adventure, one filled with new discoveries, challenges, and triumphs. And as I looked forward to the next chapter of my journey, I couldn't help but smile. The world was waiting for me, and now I had the tools to connect with it. I was ready for whatever came next. As I sat back in my chair, reflecting on everything that had happened, I couldn't help but smile. My time in Paris had been more than just a vacation. It had been a transformative experience, one that taught me not just about the city, but about myself. I had faced my fear of speaking English, made mistakes, and learned from them. And in the process, I had discovered a newfound confidence in my ability to connect with others. I realized that language learning wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. Every conversation, every interaction, every challenge was an opportunity to grow. It wasn't about getting every word right or avoiding mistakes. It was about embracing the process, enjoying the journey, and trusting that improvement would come with time. I hope that my story has shown you that learning English or any language is not a quick fix. It's a lifelong adventure that requires patience, practice, and a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone. It's about finding joy in the small victories, like successfully ordering food in a restaurant or making a new friend in a foreign city. And above all, it's about believing in yourself and knowing that every step forward is a step towards your goal. So, to anyone out there who feels uncertain or scared about learning English, I want to tell you, don't give up. Keep practicing. Keep speaking. Keep learning. The world is full of opportunities, and the language you're learning will help you unlock them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, the adventure doesn't stop here. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.